Everyone says that they want to make the world better. Politicians promise it, activists demand it, corporations advertise it. But here's the hard truth. Good intentions don't change behavior. Incentives do. Now, you don't get more honesty by asking nicely. You get it by creating systems that reward truth and punish lies. That's why capitalism works, and utopian planning doesn't. Because capitalism is the only system built for how humans actually are, not how we wish they were. I think the core message here is really that systems that reward truth beat intentions that ignore it. I'd love if it was the other way around. That's just the way it is. I mean, every society, they've got moral goals, feed the poor, reward work, protect the vulnerable, but only some design systems that make those goals inevitable outcomes, not fragile ideals, by the way. Before we start, I'm giving away my $197 Wealth Builders Toolkit free for a limited period. It's the exact system I use to manage my money and plan investments. So grab it while it's still free, link in the description, and let's dive straight in. Capitalism doesn't depend on perfect people. It channels imperfect people towards productive outcomes. You want wealth? Serve others. You want trust? Keep your word. You want repeat business? Treat people fairly. That's the genius of incentives. They don't ask people to be angels. They just make vice unprofitable and virtue rewarding. Now, human beings respond to rewards and consequences. Always have, always will. The problem isn't greed, it's misaligned incentives. Really, it is all about alignment of incentives. When you reward dependence, you get more of it. When you reward effort, you get excellence. And that's why planned economies collapse, because they pay people for obedience, not output. And it's why free economies thrive. They pay people for service, innovation, accountability. Freedom by design, it forces responsibility because you only earn when you deliver. And it's not cold economics. It's moral realism. Every failed policy starts with a noble intention, like we're going to make housing affordable. Rent controls, they're going to destroy supply. Take Ireland, for instance. I'm a real estate guy. I would love to get into Ireland, but I will probably never do that because there's just too much control. There's too much anti-landlord sentiment there. Why would I do? I've seen my uncles get destroyed with it when they were starting up. It's very small. It doesn't reward you unless you are huge, like Silicon Valley huge. You're Facebook, Google, right? Or else you just sit doing nothing. The intermediate way, even Professor Richard Tall of the ESRI got fired for kind of saying similar things, right? The disincentive to work. Right? When you say the truth, you get fired, right? And he was on one of the Nobel Committee, and yet he got fired, right? And you see this all the time over there, that like when you buy a property first, that's the time to jack up your rent. But as soon as you have it, you can only increase rent by a certain amount. That does not incentivize you to keep your building in the best condition. And it doesn't incentivize people to get in. They keep going on with the housing. The housing crisis could be solved so easily. I don't want to hear about it because it's like doing the same thing again and again and expecting a different result. And honestly, I've been hearing about the housing crisis, the medical crisis for decades and decades at this point. The other part, I think it was the PDs did this in the 1990s, political thing. We're going to make college free. And then tuition explodes as incentives vanish. In the US, I've noticed in the decade that I was here that the fees to go to the private university, like where I was at, they doubled in that decade. My salary didn't double. Now, maybe the buildings did. There was other things as well. But the thing with the fees, right, when you make them free, it just makes it more affordable. It's like, to an extent, it's like the housing, right? The fact that you can get a loan, very, very cheap loans, that increases the price because all of a sudden it artificially pushes up demand. Artificial is maybe a loaded term, but it pushes up demand because now more people can, quote unquote, afford. They take out the loan, they buy the home, more people can afford, so then the price goes up. Same with cars, same with everything else when you have all this debt. And that's how, again, in the 1950s, 1960s, they were doing this. They were pushing debt to try to avoid a Great Depression. And it's always avoiding a depression. It's always the same thing. And of course, what government doesn't want a theory, like a Keynesian theory, that promotes debt? I mean, Keynes promotes debt. Every government politician loves debt because you get re-elected. So it's kind of a reinforcing cycle, right? The politicians love to be able to take on debt because debt can allow them to do programs and so on and so forth. So that's great versus the earlier economists who were not really in favor of that too much. We'll protect jobs. You hear this on the other side of the aisle. You hear this under Trump. You hear this under other people as well, that you're going to protect jobs. But over-regulation drives companies away. This is what happened in the steel and manufacturing industry, the Rust Belt, in the 1980s, 1970s. This happened also in the UK, just there before Thatcher and then during Thatcher's time. Of course, there was a deregulation under Reagan, deregulation under Thatcher. There were certain deregulations under Trump for sure. But that idea to protect jobs, you can give people skills, but jobs is not something you can protect. Because otherwise, we'd still be protecting, people that were giving hay to horses and providing water. And we should be keeping, because when the automobile came in, we're not going to use horses, right? So, but we're losing jobs. Well, people have to shift. There are going to be costs in the meantime. But the common thread is that intentions ignore incentives. You cannot command morality through policy. You have to build it into the structure through accountability, feedback, and freedom. That's what good systems do. They make doing the right thing the easiest thing. Capitalism is often accused of being amoral. You look closer and its ethics are built into a logic of the system. Voluntary exchange, no one can force you to buy. That's the whole key concept there. Profit, you only earn if someone else benefits. Competition, it punishes laziness, rewards excellence. Again, if you're the owner of your labor, if you're the owner of your capital, you get rewarded, you got to pay fairly, etc. And that by pay fair, you got to pay the market wage. The market is what's justifiable. If there's enough of you, the price goes down. If there's not enough of you, the price goes up, the wage goes up, etc. These are natural moral feedback loops. The market's invisible hand of Adam Smith is really an invisible conscience, constantly testing whether you're serving others well enough to deserve their trust. This is true on online platforms like this. This is true in real estate. This is true in many areas. When you stop serving others, the system corrects you instantly. No committee, no manifesto, just reality. Every failed ideology makes the same mistake. It tries to build systems around intentions instead of incentives. It assumes people will share, work hard, tell the truth, without structure, ownership, or consequence, right? You pretend to pay me, I'll pretend to work. That was the usual joke back then under communism. But freedom understands the fall, right, into this imperfect world. Humans are imperfect. So it designs around that imperfection, right? Takes it on directly. It uses responsibility, not control, to bring out the best in people. It says, you keep what you earn, so you'd better earn it honestly. You can lose what you waste, so steward wisely. You're spending your money, so don't waste it. And you're going to spend it on things that you enjoy, so it's the thing that matters the most. Because again, spending other people's money on what others want, you don't know what they want. I don't know what my friends want. I can't spend it as good as they would spend it on themselves. So maybe philanthropy is better. So government is just you're spending others' money, which you're not going to spend very wisely, by the way, to satiate preferences of those that are not you, so you don't even know their preferences. At least with philanthropy, yeah, you may be actually not wasting it, that's good. You're using your own money. You're not giving people exactly what they would desire if the money was in their own hands, but at least because it's your money, you're spending it, keeping the cost minimum, you're spending it wisely. Although it's not satiating their exact preferences, you're not wasting the money because it is your money and no one spends that. The best way is when you spend your money on what you want. That is the absolute best because in that case, you don't waste your own money as much as you'd waste other people's money. When others give you money, it's like it's not really your money. You're not going to be as careful with it. You're not going to be as good a steward with it. But you also spend it better when it's not just your own money, but also when it's on something that you want, it's something that's yours. Not for somebody else, not like I'll get you an ice cream because I think you want an ice cream. No, I'll get myself exactly what my favorite preference is. By the way, if this part is clicking for you, you'll love the Wealth Builders Toolkit. It's the exact $197 system I use to plan and track all of this. I'm giving it away for free for a limited period. So grab it while it's still free, links in the description. So capitalism, it's not cynicism, it's wisdom. Look, we all want a better world, but the good systems beat good intentions every single time because they take human nature seriously. Capitalism isn't moral because it flatters us the way communism does. It's moral because it disciplines us. It channels selfishness into service, ambition into innovation, and freedom into responsibility. Look, you wouldn't have had the Apple phone, you wouldn't have had the car, the modern inventions, the internet, insulin, penicillin, the heart surgery. You wouldn't have had that without the promise of some kind of reward, monetary reward. It's not utopia. It's ordered liberty. And it's the only kind that lasts. Capitalism doesn't need fixing. We do. Because in the end, the system works if we do.